there is a link between the gut-brain axis. So obviously there's different axes of the gut, and one of them is the gut-brain axis. And within the gut, we actually produce 50% of dopamine and 90 to 95% of serotonin. So both of these two are neurotransmitters. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is kind of a motivation and drive one that it helps us get up and go and do things. So 50% of this is produced in the gut, and also with our serotonin, this is kind of our mood modulating one. I always say where, like, in terms of our ability to maybe tolerate stress, this is what helps us tolerate stress, so to speak, because it helps us calm down. It has a calming effect on us. So 90 to 95% of this is produced in the gut with a good, healthy, functioning gut. So how you link that to mental health is if we have inadequate amounts of dopamine and serotonin, I'm not going to say people will have mental health issues, but they'll feel a lot less motivated, a lot more stressed, a lot less calm. So they'll therefore probably maybe feel like they're more depressed, should we say. So in terms of like a link there, like if you're eating bad quality food, drinking alcohol, which will wreck digestive health, then that can potentially cause like you to not produce as much dopamine and serotonin, and therefore that's kind of the link that I would kind of connect there with, like internal health wise, like digestive wise. And I'd just say in general, like when you're eating low quality food, you're drinking alcohol, these will all suppress like our dopamine pathways. So obviously when we eat these foods or when we drink alcohol, we have like a spike in dopamine, don't we? Because some people like doing these things and they have that instant gratification of doing it or whatever. So then what I always say is what goes up must come down. So if you're like on this high of going out with your mates, like eating a lot of different good quality food, then like near enough maybe straight after you stop, all that drops.
Yeah.
So then that drop, and when you have that drop in dopamine and serotonin, then you're going to feel a little bit more depressed. I kind of do that because I don't really like labeling things of depression. It's kind of like, I always see it that I feel like depression is a bit different to what some people think depression is.
Like perceive.
Yeah, like I feel like it is a bit skewed these days where people might be feeling a little bit shit one day and then feel like they're depressed, whereas it might just be that they're actually just having a bad day. Yeah.
And the food's just making them feel worse.
Yeah, and like maybe they've just had a bad day where they've overate or they've like had a glass of wine or a beer and then they feel a bit shit after it. So I feel like obviously them are kind of maybe the two links that I make from internal health with mental health, so to speak.
So when somebody, like you say, drinks the beer on the weekend or goes out and has a processed food, and then they have that spike in dopamine, and then it comes back down even further than what their baseline would be perceived to be, would they then feel the need to eat more poor quality food to then jump back up to where they was?
I feel like that can be the factor. So like, for example, if somebody is low in dopamine, therefore their emotion will more than likely be higher. So they'll probably not be able to tolerate stress as efficiently as somebody who's got like more steady levels of dopamine. Then they'll more than likely, or they'll be more likely to reach for that highly palatable food, which will then jump it up for that time that they're eating it, and then literally straight after crash it back down.
Yeah.
So I would say that they would be more than likely, and that's kind of where it's up to a person in order to manage that in a way of like actually catching themselves in the act, so to speak. Like that's what I always say to clients. Like if you are eating a food and you're not really realizing, because some people actually just reach for these things because it's a habit and they just don't realize, and they've ate it.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like you've got to catch yourself in the act, and you've got to kind of slow your brain down, like maybe count to 10 deep breaths, as daft as that sounds, and like slow the emotion down, calm the emotion down, because we know that if we have some deep diaphragmatic breathing, then this is going to actually calm our central nervous system. And when we are in a state of like emotion, we're in probably a state of fight or flight, which like maybe sympathetic dominance, which means stressed out. And then we're going to act out of emotion more.
So thinking logically.
Yeah, so like if we kind of take these 10 deep breaths and therefore calm our central nervous system, it'll allow the logical side of our brain to kick in, because the emotional side always kicks in first. And then it sometimes takes a while for the logical side to then start going, like breaking things down and thinking more logical, like, is this food going to make me feel better in the long run? Does my action here align with what I want to achieve? Or little things like that.
What do you feel like's the main emotions that either yourself or clients sort of jump to then eat poor quality food or experience?
So in terms of the main emotions, what do you mean by that?
So like what emotions do they feel? Do you feel like it's stress, anger?
Yeah, obviously I feel like stress is probably the biggest factor. Like there is so many different types of stress though. So there's like internal, like physiological stress, we'll say, psycho-emotional stress, like external work-related, like lifestyle stress. We could even like put in that there's kind of stresses from like the environment, like environmental stresses. So like when we say stress, I would say like the biggest ones are probably like psycho-emotional, where it could be like some like traumatic past event, what potentially triggers that person to actually overeat or turn to alcohol as kind of an escape, should we say? Which again, I'm not qualified to talk about, and that's not my field. But then we could, and then another one I would say is like external stress. So like, for example, like work life or home life is a big one as well. Like, is your social circle or your social environment supporting what you want to do, or is it not? Is it trying to pull you away? And I feel like they're probably the main ones, in my opinion, that I see clients get pulled off track from, should we say. I'd say it's definitely like social environment is a massive one. And potentially like work, and then maybe trauma, unresolved trauma, should we say. Yeah,
well, in psychology in uni, there was 13 studies which looked at the effects of stress on diet quality. And I think every single one of them found that the higher somebody perceived the stress levels to be, the poorer the quality of food they went towards. And then obviously, like you said, like we just mentioned, if you're eating poor quality food and having a spike in dopamine, then it's crashing back down. You're going to sometimes feel the need to eat poor quality food again. So you'd end up in sort of like a vicious loop of constantly feeling the need to eat poor quality food. Have you ever experienced that with clients?
Yeah, but a lot of the time, like I always talk about like a negative feedback loop and a positive feedback loop. Like I always say, like if somebody's in this vicious negative feedback loop, they're gonna just keep doing what they've always done unless they take action and like try and break the chain.
Yeah,
breaking the chain's the biggest thing. So like I just said, catching yourself in the act, to like actually finding out where you're going wrong in your week and why this is happening. So finding a trigger. So for example, say if you come home on a Wednesday and then you've had a stressful day at work on a Wednesday and you reach for a bottle of wine or a few beers, then you need to kind of actually first pinpoint where that's coming from and why it's coming, why that's happening. Yeah, and like I feel like with people, they so this is just my opinion, but like I always think very simplistically on why I'm feeling aware that I'm feeling. So for example, say if I feel rubbish one day, I'm feeling a bit down, I've had a bit of a stressful day, like my first thought is to do something that makes me feel good. Yeah, everybody's is. That's why some people actually turn to these foods and turn to alcohol, because it makes them feel good. Sometimes it's rewiring the brain on what makes them feel good. So like realizing that these kind of foods and drink or whatever make you feel good for the split second, but make you feel rubbish afterwards. Yeah. So then, for example, rewiring the brain and getting somebody to actually enjoy like training, enjoy going for a walk, enjoy eating good quality food because it makes them feel good, and rewiring the brain to actually turn to these type of things to a certain degree to actually help them deal with stress to a certain degree. Yeah? So like, I'm not saying that somebody should just start overtraining to deal with stress and use that as a different coping mechanism, so to speak. But what I'm saying is sometimes that is still the first step to actually help them stop doing these other things, so to speak.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this clip. It's just a little insight into my new podcast called The New Renaissance. If you want to check out the full episode, they'll be linked on YouTube or Spotify. Please subscribe on YouTube and please follow on Spotify and give me any feedback on the episodes that you listen to.